Okay. Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you so much for your patience tonight. Morning time, nighttime. I don't even know how you guys were chatting. I see that you guys were chatting. I don't even know how that works. I wasn't on, but yet I see that there's already a chat session going on. You guys, I apologize. Thank you so much for patiently waiting. I was asleep myself and I didn't have an alarm set, so I do apologize. But I sure was ready before all that debacle happened. So we've got Oink here, and he's already asleep in his gator jammies. We've got she doesn't have a name back here. I can't even think of what sculpt she is, but she's ready in her unicorn jammies. And we got Pooh Bear over here, and then we have Sasha. She's in her onesie. Um, so I was going to try my best and read a few chapters tonight, so we'll see how I do. And then tomorrow night, I'll do the same thing, and then that'll be it after that. So, 9 chapters in this book, so I try my best to read as much as I can. But if it piques your interest, you can always try the local library. So, without further ado, The Girl with the Glass Bird, chapter 5. And I did say chapter 5 yesterday, but actually we hadn't even got to chapter 5. So we're at chapter 5 now. A cozy tone. A mile or so beyond the village. Oh, and I can see the comments now. I still won't be able to save them, but I can at least see them now. So thank you for your comments, everyone. So, a cozy tone. A mile or so beyond the village, they came to a pair of tall stone gateposts with a sign saying Knight's Haddon. Edie sat in silence as Cousin Charles drove over a cattle grid and wait, maybe I did read chapter 5. Oh, let me see. I know that I was reading this to myself. Okay, no, okay. Okay, I don't think I read it. I don't think I did. But if I did, I guess that's okay. A mile or so beyond the village, they came to a pair of tall stone gateposts with a sign saying Knight's Haddon. Edie sat in silence as Cousin Charles drove over a cattle grid and into a thick tunnel of trees with branches that hung low over the windshield. Why did they let the road get so overgrown? Edie wondered. It's not a road, Cousin Charles said impatiently. It is a drive. Like saying prep for homework? Edie asked. Not unlike, Charles replied. As he spoke, the drive opened out into wide fields. A park, Cousin Charles explained, but Edie thought how different it looked from any of the parks she had been to in London. It was huge and empty, sloping down on one side of them toward a swollen river surrounded by sodden gray marsh, and on the other side rising up into a low ridge of hills. There were no buildings, not even a barn, and beyond the river the view ended in thick black woods. Edie leaned her face into the coldness of the car window. The drive went on so long that even though it was a single road leading only one way, she had a strange sense of being lost. Eventually, they turned the corner, and in front of them, towering above a sloping lawn, appeared a huge, pale stone building with 4 spearing turrets. Your new home, Charles said in a bored voice as Edie gave a sharp intake of breath. Everything about the house seemed to spike and soar. There were upon row of sharp, pointed windows frowning down at her through curtains of flowerless creepers, and the turrets which stood at each corner of the building rose high above the long, jagged roof. Edie thought how unlike a school it looked, with a frosty beauty that seemed strangely out of keeping with the surrounding patchwork of tennis courts and playing fields. Charles drove on in silence into a paved courtyard and pulled up in front of a flight of stone steps. As the car stopped a short, round as the car stopped, a short, round woman came hurrying down to greet them. She seemed to be bursting out of her green wool suit, her face beaming beneath a cap of black hair. "Now you must be Mr. Rodriguez," she said warmly as she clutched Cousin Charles's hand. Edie recognized the faint Scottish lilt in her accent, for the woman living in the next door flat in London had been Scottish too, and the memory gave her a sudden pang of homesickness. "And you must be our new girl," the woman went on. "I'm matron. That's what I'm known as here," she said. It was she said it with a slightly harsh laugh, as if she thought it was a foolish name and assumed others would too. "It is very kind of you to take Edith at such short notice," Cousin Charles said smoothly. Edie noticed the change in his manner since the nursing home, where he had seemed less keen to make a good impression. "I hope she won't be too much trouble for you. Boarding school might come as a bit of a shock to her. She's been taught at home for the last 2 years." "Would that be with a governess?" Matron asked, looking at Edie with interest. "A grandmother? Well, well, you are unusual," Matron murmured, gazing at Edie over folded arms. "I don't think we ever had a child who's been taught at home before." Her expression was kind, but Edie felt self-conscious. If Cousin Charles wanted her to blend in, she wondered why he had revealed so much. Matron turned and summoned a man to unload the luggage from the car, and Edie watched nervously as her trunk and tuck box were wheeled away. She knew from the schoolgirl books she had read that tuck boxes were intended for keeping food in, but Cousin Charles hadn't given her any to put in hers. Instead, she had filled it with all her most personal treasures: letters, photographs, some old school books of her mother's, and as it disappeared, she surreptitiously reached into her pocket to reassure herself that the key to the padlock was still there. "Don't worry, dear. They'll be taken to your dormitory," Matron said, noting Edie's anxiety. "You can unpack yourself. There'll be plenty of time before supper. And I hope your tuck box hasn't got anything contraband in it," she added, turning to Cousin Charles with a smile. "We do reserve the right to search them once in a while." "Quite right," Cousin Charles replied jovially, but he shot Edie a meaningful glance. "I'm very sorry Miss Fotheringay isn't here to greet you in person, but she's on her way back from a headmistress's conference in Oxford," Matron said, assuming a more businesslike tone. "But I can assure you, Mr. Rodriguez, Edith will be very well looked after, and the girls write a proper letter home every Sunday. No email nonsense here." "What's nonsense about a letter that doesn't need an envelope or what's nonsense about a letter that doesn't need an envelope or a stamp?" thought Edie, crossly in the awkward pause that followed. She realized that Matron was waiting for her and cousin Charles to say goodbye, and she detected a shadow of uncertainty on her cousin's face, as though this were an act he had forgotten to rehearse. He had never kissed her before, but he did it now, stooping to touch his lips against her cheek, while his arms remained stiffly by his side. When he had gone, Edie followed Matron inside and found herself in a large hall filled with trophies and shiny silver shields. Everything looked clean and polished, and very old. The walls were covered in panels of dark wood, and there were carvings on the ceiling, and gloomy-looking portraits hanging up the stairs. It reminded Edie of a country house she had once visited with her class at primary school, and it felt strange to think she was going to live in such a place. She looked about her carefully, trying to make a mental inventory of the doors and corridors that led off in every direction. Charles had said that she would waste no time in learning her way around, but she felt overwhelmed by how much there was to take in. As she was peering about her, a bell rang, and Edie felt the floor shake. Then all at once a flood of girls appeared from the landing above and came crashing down the stairs like a wave about to swallow her. Girls, girls, Matron cried, clapping her hands for attention. The lower four class is still in music practice. Quiet, please. The noise subsided a little, and Edie felt a swarm of eyes settling on her face. She was wearing exactly the same blue uniform as everyone else, but felt as conspicuous as if she were dressed as a clown. It was a relief when a voice hollered, "Tea!" at which the girls streamed away through a door on the right. Matron smoothed down her skirt as though she had been set upon. "I'll take you to your dormitory," she said. "Then when Miss Fotheringay's back, I'll fetch you for tea." Edie was surprised. She had not been expecting a private audience with the headmistress. Matron smiled. "Don't look so worried. She always has tea with the new girls. You're not in trouble yet. And when you are, just come to Matron and she'll sort things out for you. They don't call me Matron Mend for nothing." "Thank you," Edie said, but something in the cozy tone made her uneasy. Cousin Charles had warned her that she was to avoid getting into trouble at all costs. Why did Matron Mend seem so certain that she would? Matron led her down a maze of corridors with so many twists and turns that Edie was sure she would never find her way back to the hall. It was only when they started climbing a steep spiral staircase that she realized they must have entered one of the turrets. When they had climbed 2 floors, they came to a curved landing leading onto a long corridor with doors on either side. "This is you," Matron said, stopping halfway down. There was a list of names on the door, written in beautiful italic letters. Edie saw Stolanov, A, and her own name, Wilson, E, at the bottom. The sight of her name underneath the other girls gave Edie a jolt. "As if I belonged here," she thought, almost guiltily. The door opened into a large, bright dormitory overlooking the park. The 5 tall wooden beds were all set wide apart, each with a green candlewick cover and a pine bedside table. There were also 5 identical chests of drawers and a large enamel sink. Despite inorderliness, the room had a lived-in feel, with each girl marking her territory with photographs, toys, and teddy bears. Edie's trunk and tuck box had been placed at the end of the bed nearest to the door. It looked very bare in comparison to the others. There you are, Matron said, fluffing up the pillow, then briskly marching off to pick up a stray sock. Edie, uncertain what to do with herself, took off her coat and laid it on her bed. Matron shook her head. Coats, gloves, scarves, and outdoor shoes are all hung in the cloakroom downstairs. One of the others will show you where, she explained, and you'll unpack later. But when you do, remember that it's strictly 2 ornaments only on your bedside table. Most girls choose 2 photographs, but you can have 1 photograph and a clock if you prefer, so long as it's not a clock radio. Radios aren't allowed. And as for anything, Matron rolled her eyes. None of that fancy technology here, young lady. And you can have 6 things on your chest of drawers, one of which should be your hairbrush, and a headband or a hair clip would count as another item. But if you put all your headbands and hair clips together in a box, then you could have as many headbands and hair clips as you could fit in the box, and it would only count as one thing. Is that all clear, dear? Good. It would only count as good, she went on, taking Edie's blank stare for an answer. Now you tidy yourself up, and I'll be back in 10 ticks. Edie had never shared a bedroom with anyone before, and when Matron had gone, she suddenly felt self-conscious. She stood frozen a moment by her bed, then ventured around the room, peeking furtively at the toys and photographs. The corner bed had a rather haughty-looking china doll on the pillow, with glassy emerald eyes. Edie walked over and recognized the photograph of Anastasia's father on the chest of drawers, but looking very different from the solemn portrait Cousin Charles had shown her of the prince. Here he was leaning against the side of a sailing boat, his green eyes smiling from beneath windswept pepper gray hair. Then something next to the photograph caught Edie's eye. At first she thought it was a jewel, but when she moved closer, she saw that it was a glass bird with sculpted feathers and a fanned tail, and shining violet beads for its eyes. Edie thought it was the prettiest thing she had ever seen, tiny and flawless, and though the glass was shining, it had an ancient, centuries-old air, like an ornament peered at in a museum. It looked much too fragile to touch, and yet before she quite knew what she was doing, she had reached to pick it up. As she did, she heard the door burst open behind her. Oh, Edie gasped, jumping around to see 4 girls appear. One was Anastasia. Edie recognized her at once from the photographs she had seen, taking in the dark eyes and pale skin and the hair that tumbled over her shoulders in thick brown ringlets. It struck Edie that there was something fragile and exotic about her, like the glass bird. The other girls looked at Edie curiously, but Anastasia did not seem to notice that Edie had been rifling through her things. She sat down on her bed with a dreamy expression, as if her thoughts were somewhere quite different. Hello, I'm Sally, said a plump, pleasant-looking girl with a pink face and a bouncy bob of straw-colored hair. Hey, what's that you're holding? Isn't that Anastasia's bird? Edie's cheeks burned. I'm sorry. I just wanted to look at it, she stammered, fighting back a sudden sting of tears. Anastasia watched carefully as she replaced the bird on the chest of drawers, but did not say a word. You won't get off to a very good start here if you poke about in other people's things, said a tall, pinched-faced girl. How would you like it if we— Oh, leave her alone, Phoebe. She's new, piped up another girl. You can see she's sorry, and I'm sure she didn't mean to snoop. I'm Alice, by the way, she said, turning to Edie with a warm smile. Edie looked at her gratefully, feeling she had been pulled from a ditch. Something about Alice was very reassuring. She had brown hair, scraped briskly into a ponytail, and wore a badge that said Class Monitor. Edie looked at her gratefully, feeling she had been pulled from— I've told you, Anastasia, Alice said teasingly. If you insist on bringing back all these beautiful things and turning the dormitory into a museum, then you must expect people to want to look at them. Anastasia shrugged. I don't mind if people give Bertie a stroke, she said, gazing at Edie from beneath thick black lashes. Her voice was gentle, and despite what Cousin Charles had said about her having no trace of a Russian accent, Edie detected something foreign. As Edie walked back to her own bed, she caught Phoebe's hissed warning. We'd better look out for her. Edie wished the floor could swallow her, but the others chattered on as if quite used to Phoebe's spite. Lucky you having a full tuck box, said Sally. It's only a week since half term, but we've finished ours already. It's a pity you've arrived so late, Alice said sympathetically. You've missed the choir auditions and the trials for the first year lacrosse team, but they might still let you try out. Edie tried to look interested, though she suspected her mission would leave no time for such things. Sally, meanwhile, was staring hungrily at her tuck box. Oh, do show us what you've got. I'd love to see. Edie felt herself reddening again. She was too embarrassed to admit she had nothing to offer them, and she didn't want anyone to see her phone. It is the custom for new girls to share their tuck, Phoebe said, but I suppose we can't force you. Oh, don't start up again, Phoebe, Alice said. It's all right, you know. You don't have to share with us if you don't want to. And you can lock it if you'd like, she said, pointing to the padlock on Edie's tuck box. But you'll have to hand over the key when they do an inspection. Edie looked horrified. They searched them, Sally said darkly, and if you've got any sweets, they'll be confiscated and you won't get them back until the end of term. If Matron Greedy Pig Pen doesn't eat them first, Alice giggled. I don't have any sweets, Edie mumbled. I don't have any cake either. Anastasia turned and looked at Edie thoughtfully. Don't worry about Phoebe, she said, speaking with quiet authority. It is up to you to decide what you want to show us. Phoebe looked furious, and Edie was relieved when Matron reappeared. It was time to meet the headmistress. Miss Fotheringay's study was on the other side of the school, down another series of corridors, and Edie tried to compose herself on the way. She had been nervous about meeting her head teacher, but now she was more concerned about the scene she had just fled. Whatever you do, don't draw attention to yourself, Cousin Charles had warned her. But she had been caught snooping before she had even unpacked. And after the business over her tuck box, they'd all think she was mean. What does it matter whether or not they like me, she thought as Matron knocked on the headmistress's door. As soon as my job's done, I'll be gone from this stupid place forever. Chapter 6. In Loco parentis. In you go, matron said, nudging her through the door. It took Edie's eyes a moment to adjust to the dim lighting. When they did, she found herself in a large, firelit study filled with books. The walls followed the gentle curve of the tower, and its tall arched windows showed the sun sinking in a brilliant blaze across the park. In the corner of the room, a figure was seated behind a wide leather desk, her head bowed over a pile of papers. A black cat crouched beside the brass desk lamp, tracking the progress of the woman's fountain pen as she turned over a document and signed her name with a flourish. Done, she said, returning the pen to its lid and looking up with the flicker of a smile. Edie looked back unnerved. Cousin Charles had been dismissive of Miss Fotheringay. She hasn't been there long. A bit at sea, I'm told. Stolly said she was a dragon. Keep your head down, and she shouldn't take much notice of you. But the woman sitting behind the desk was not what she had been expecting. Her face was beautiful, long and narrow, with features like that looked as though they had been carved out of stone. More than anything, though, Edie was struck by the eyes, blue and unblinking beneath hooded lids. She felt herself being scrutinized in a way that was quite unfamiliar to her, as if everything inside her were being turned out and searched. Close the door, Edith, and come and sit down, Miss Fotheringay said at last. Edie followed her toward the fire, noting the wisp of gray in the headmistress' pale brown hair and the gold thread in her dress. Here, Miss Fotheringay said, patting the sofa. Edie perched uneasily. A delicate tea was laid out on a low table in front of her, flowered china and cakes on a glass stand. Miss Fotheringay sat beside her and reached for the teapot. No, Black Puss, you keep off the food, she said, patting away. No, Black Puss, you keep off the food, she said, batting away the cat that had approached the table with its tail erect. Although I agree that Miss Wilson here has the air of a bird ready for flight, she added in an amused voice, I hope we can hold on to you long enough, Edith, to stop you wanting to leave. Edie didn't know how to respond. Had she been found out already? But Miss Fotheringay was calmly busying herself with the tea things, and gave no sign of having meant more than she said. Eat, she ordered, choosing her two little cakes. Edie balanced her plate on her lap, crumbling her food with her fingers. Miss Fotheringay sipped her tea. Tell me, Edith, she said, what brings you to Knight's Haddon in the middle of term? Edie felt a tightening in her throat. The question was unexpected, and she needed time to think. She looked up into the headmistress's face, but as quickly looked away again. There was something in her eyes that made Edie flinch. I did not press your guardian for too much information, Miss Fotheringay went on. Sometimes parents are afraid to tell me things because they think I'll refuse to accept children who have been in trouble. It is for the most part an unnecessary caution. I'm reluctant to turn away any child I have room for. But if something went wrong at your last school, then I should like to hear about it. Edie remained silent. Her orders were to blend in. Should she make up a story to fit Miss Fotheringay's assumption that she was some sort of delinquent? Tell me, child, were you unhappy there? No, no, Edie said, surprised into telling the truth. I liked it. You just happened not to have attended for the last 2 years, Miss Fotheringay observed. Edie, failing to think of a story, decided to stick to the facts. To some of them, anyway. Babka, that's my grandmother, took me out of school. She she needed me at home, so she taught me herself. I see. But then Babka had to go into a home and my guardian decided to send me here. Edie finished clumsily. Miss Fotheringay nodded. Mr. Rodriguez mentioned how keen you were to come here. He was afraid you might have a romantic idea of boarding school from all the old-fashioned storybooks you've read. Edie felt ambushed. Cousin Charles had warned her that she would have to lie. You can lie all you like, although it's best to stick to the same one. Yet she found herself shocked to discover that he had lied about her. Perhaps he was the one who was keen, Edith, not you, Miss Fotheringay continued. You don't strike me as the sort of girl who comes to a school like this with fixed ideas about how much fun it is going to be. Edith said nothing. There was something about this dramatic-looking woman with searchlight eyes and a quiet, probing voice that made Edie want her approval, but an instinct told her to hold back. There are some people, Babka had warned her, who always want to know more than it is safe to tell. When did you stop living with your grandmother? Was Miss Fotheringay's next question. I had understood that you lived with your uncle and aunt. I left Babka a month ago, Edie replied, when she went into a home. Ah, Miss Fotheringay said, so your grandmother has been the important one. Edie had a vision of Babka sitting alone with her chessmen and fought a sudden sting of tears. Yes, I suppose, she began, wishing Miss Fotheringay would take charge of the conversation again, but her headmistress was watching her in silence. She is waiting for me to cry, Edie thought, and she did, her tears dripping onto her crumbled cakes. Miss Fotheringay gave her a handkerchief, and through glazed eyes, Edie saw the initials C.F. embroidered in crimson thread and wondered what the C stood for. But Edie was not crying because of Babka. She was crying because someone was being kind to her. Miss Fotheringay did not seem at all awkward or embarrassed. Black Puss jumped up into the space between them on the sofa and began to purr. I hope you're not afraid of cats, Miss Fotheringay said, stroking him lovingly. This one was a stray. He used to be afraid of me, but I think I've won him over. We had a cat when I lived with Babka, Edie said, trying to keep her voice even. Then when Babka went blind, I was sent to live with my aunt and uncle and their 3 sons, but they lived in the country and they didn't really want. Then cousin Charles asked me to live with him in London, and then Edie faltered, suffocated by secrets. I miss my grandmother, she said finally, for this at least was true. Then it occurred to her that it was better than true, that missing Babka could be her alibi for all the other feelings she could not confess. Edie talked a little more about Babka and her failing sight. Miss Fotheringay asked the occasional question such as, who did the cooking? And what happened to the cat? And Edie explained about the eating out of cans and the cat being sent to an animal shelter. But mostly Miss Fotheringay just listened, and when Edie had stopped talking, she had the look of someone who was still listening, or at least thinking very hard about what she had heard. At length she said, I have a hunch about you, Edith. I think you will have something extra to offer. It is often the way with children who have suffered more than is quite fair. I hope that Knight's Haddon will be the beginning of a more settled period in your life. The first few weeks at a new school are always difficult, and you may find you are behind in certain subjects, but you'll catch up soon enough. And in the meantime, you must try not to get anxious about your work. The teachers are here to help you. Of course, this is true of staff in other schools, but at boarding school, all the teachers are in loco parentis. Do you know what that means? Edie shook her head. It's Latin. Can you try to work it out? I don't know any Latin. Miss Fotheringay smiled. You will. Locus is Latin for place. It's where the word location comes from. In loco parentis means in the place of parents. You are used to being the only child without parents, but here at Knights Haddon, all the pupils are, in a sense, parentless. My staff and I try to make that up to you. Edie bit her lip, trying to take this in. But a boarding school can only thrive so long as its members are truthful and trusting. There is no place at Knights Haddon for secrets or lies. Your success now and in the future will depend on your ability to be open and honest. It is the open, honest girls, Edith, of who I am truly proud. Edie's heart gave a confused lurch. This was very different from the talk Cousin Charles had given her in the car. She stared at the cat, not daring to meet Headmistress's eyes. She would not be here long, she reminded herself. It hardly mattered if she failed to please Miss Fotheringay, and yet this short speech made her very uncomfortable. Have you met the girls in your dormitory? Edie nodded. Now let me see. You're with Sally Lanyon, aren't you? And Alice and Phoebe, is it? Yes, said Edie nervously. There must be one more, said Miss Fotheringay, frowning as she replaced her teacup on the tray. Who's your fifth? Edie had a sudden fear that Miss Fotheringay suspected something of her connection to Anastasia. Why else was she watching her so intently, waiting for her to say her name? I can't remember, she faltered, and felt the red rising. Miss Fotheringay looked thoughtful. Isn't it Anastasia Stolanov? She said. Perhaps you haven't met her yet. Yes, no, I think I have. I'm not sure. Miss Fotheringay looked at her carefully before seeming to shake an idea from her head. Of course you'll take time to settle in, she went on, but not too long, I hope. You've missed half a term of Latin, so I shall tutor you myself in that. Meanwhile, it's probably a good idea to involve yourself in as many things as possible. Have you ever played lacrosse? Edie shook her head. What about music? Perhaps you could audition for the orchestra. I don't play anything. Or the choir? I can't sing. There is a school of thought that says everyone can sing, but not being able to myself, I don't belong to it. Drama? She said suddenly. There are auditions tomorrow for the first-year play. It is to be The Merchant of Venice, directed by one of the prefects. Perhaps you would like to try for that. Yes, I'd like to, but I can't act, Edie said uncertainly. I don't believe you, Edith, Miss Fotheringay said, smiling. I suspect you might be rather good at it. Chapter 7. The strictest school in England. When Edie returned to the dormitory, Sally was there. Matron said I could stay behind during prep to help you unpack, she said, looking very pleased. I'm your shadow. Someone who shows them around and looks out for them and tells them what to do. Well, helps them if they don't know what to do, she corrected herself. Edie was glad it was Sally, not Phoebe, who had been appointed to look after her. Miss Fotheringay asked me, Sally went on excitedly. I'm the first of the first years to be made a shadow. The others will have to wait until next year, when we get the next lot of new girls in. I thought she'd ask Alice. She's the good one. She's a class monitor, Sally sighed. I always seem to be in trouble. They set about unpacking Edie's things. Sally showed her how everything had to be arranged in a particular way. Shirts on one side of the wardrobe, dresses on another, toothbrushes on a particular glass shelf in the bathroom. And you'd better get it right, because if anything's found in the wrong place, you'll be given a demerit, and you'll have to put that back, Sally said as Edie unpacked a pale pink dress Babka had made her. We're only allowed one set of home clothes. Edie put the dress back in the trunk, but took the opportunity of pulling out her flashlight and sneaking it into her bedside table. A bell rang. Supper, Sally said, her face brightening. Come on. All the meals are at different times on different days, she explained, leading Edie down the stairs. Supper's at 6:45 today because there's no school council. That's when all the notices are read out. But on other days it's at 6:30, and breakfast is at 7:30 on Monday to Thursday, and 7:45 on Friday, because, oh, don't worry, you can always ask me, she finished hurriedly. They passed through a stone archway and came to some steps leading up to a heavy oak door, which they arrived at in time to see swing shut. We're late, Sally groaned, hurrying up the stairs and pushing it open. Edie followed her into a dim paneled dining room full of girls sitting silently at trestle tables. The door creaked as it closed behind them, and everyone turned to stare. There were so many faces, Edie felt dizzy, but it was the mistress standing at the end of the nearest table whose presence she found most disconcerting. She was solidly built, with a flushed face and dark, bulging eyes, a pair of spectacles hanging around her neck. As she looked at them, her head seemed to lower, reminding Edie of a bull about to charge. If you are going to take responsibility for a new girl, Sally, you might at least have the courtesy to ensure that she arrives in the dining hall in time for grace, she said in a ringing voice. Sorry, Miss Mannering, Sally mumbled. So you should be. Lateness is a vice which loses wars. Yes, Miss Mannering, Sally sighed. Now hurry up and sit down, Miss Mannering said crisply, holding the room in silence as Sally led Edie to a table in the corner. Then you may begin, Miss Mannering said, and all at once the room exploded with the sound of chattering and clattering. Edie and Sally were the only first years at their table, and the other girls hardly acknowledged them, other than the occasional remark such as, butter, please. Miss Mannering's the deputy headmistress, Sally explained, helping herself to water from a huge tin pitcher. She goes bright red and shouts a lot, but you'll get used to it. Phoebe says she's going through the change, she added in a thrilled whisper. Oh, Edie replied, not sure what this meant. Anyway, you've got to watch out for her, Sally went on. She loves gating people on the weekends, so that you're stuck here on the school grounds while everyone else goes into town. And she'll send you to Fothy for the slightest thing. The two of them are thick as thieves, and that, Sally went on in a lowered voice, is Helen. She's the head girl. At the end of the table, a statuesque young woman was serving the shepherd's pie. She was beautiful, with wide hazel eyes and a tumbling mass of golden hair. Edie found it hard to believe that she and Helen were members of the same schoolgirl race. Helen's ancestors lived at Knight's Haddon years ago before it became a school, and the family still owns part of the park. Sally explained furtively. She's got her own place on the other side of the woods, a little brick tower. The prefects are allowed to have picnics there. Sally, Helen said with a gentle half smile, don't whisper at table. It's rude. Sally blushed, and Edie noticed how much more chastened she seemed by Helen's mild telling off than she'd been by the rebuke from Miss Mannering. Edie was curious. She had never before heard of any schoolgirl owning her own tower, but the snippets of conversation she picked up at supper gave her a glimpse of a very different world. If I get a good report this term, Daddy's going to buy me a new pony. Clappers got so fast. Clappers got so fat we can't enter any of the gymbanas. We're going skiing this Christmas. I can't wait. Our cook gave her notice the day before my birthday. Mummy was furious. She says that if she can't find another one, we'll all have to spend Christmas in a hotel. Edie felt she had nothing to contribute. She remembered Babka once working as a cook in a Polish restaurant, but she had never met children with cooks of their own. At her old school, they had talked about TV, and Edie had always watched plenty of that. But here, she remembered ruefully, there wasn't one. The food's not bad, is it? Sally said, passing up her plate for a second helping of treacle tart. They say it used to be disgusting, boiled fish and cabbage and stuff like that. But Fathy put her foot down. Are you any good at tennis? She asked suddenly, digging greedily into a bowl of clotted cream. Edie was about to admit she had never played, but then she remembered Cousin Charles' warning about pretending to be the same as everyone else. I'm a bit out of practice, she said. It was a relief when a bell clanged and supper was over. Why did your parents choose this school for you, Edie? Sally asked as they were walking back to the dormitory. I don't really know. My mother chose it because she came here. Anastasia's mother was here too. They were in the same year and they were so naughty. They used to sneak into the kitchen at night to steal food. And once they ran away together and spent the night in the tower. Lucky them, Edie said, thinking of her miserable attempt to run away from her cousins. I know it must have been fun, Sally said wistfully, but we can't do things like that anymore. It's much, much stricter than it used to be. It's probably the strictest school in England now. Didn't they warn you? She laughed, seeing Edie's startled expression. Old-fashioned manners by old-fashioned methods. That's what it says in the prospectus. That's why we are not allowed cell phones or computers, and why we have to write lines and walk up corridors on one side and down them on another, and jump to attention every time a mistress enters the room. Our parents think it's good for us. My mother's an actress and my father works in banking. She finished breathlessly. What do your parents do? Edie bit her lip. She hated telling people that her parents were dead and then having to deal with their embarrassed reaction. Sally was sure to find out the truth soon enough, but Edie wasn't going to help her. They're journalists, she replied. Sally looked uncertain. I don't know anyone else here whose parents are journalists. You might be the only one. Edie deflected. Are we ever allowed out? She asked, thinking of London, where she had run messages for Babka up and down their busy street. We're allowed to walk to the village on Saturday afternoons in pairs, but there's not much there, just a couple of tea rooms. And when you're new, you end up being gated half the time because you're still learning the rules. Oh, don't look so worried. It's not as bad as that, Sally said. Most of the teachers are okay. Even the man is more bark than bite. The man? Sally giggled. Miss Mannering, that's what everyone calls her. Edie thought of the thickest woman glaring at her across the dining room with a lowered head, and thought the nickname very fitting. "What's Matron like?" she asked. "We call her Matron Men because she's so good at fixing stuff. She can put anything back together. She even fixed a string on my tennis racket once." "Is she nice?" "Oh, she's all right, but I'm not one of her favorites like Anastasia. She's her complete pet." Edie detected a note of envy in Sally's voice. "I'm too naughty to be anyone's pet," she went on, taking Edie's arm. "Oh, Edie, I'm glad you've come. I didn't like having an empty bed in the dormitory, and some of the others are a bit, well, you need to look out for Phoebe. She's always in a bad mood." "Why?" "I don't know why," Sally shrugged. "She's just like that. And Alice is nice, but she's a bit of a goody-goody. I think it's because she's on a scholarship and is always afraid of losing it. Her father lost his job." "How do you know so much?" asked Edie, who was making a mental note of everything Sally told her. Sally shrugged. "I just do." "And what about Anastasia?" Edie asked, in a casual voice as she could muster. "Her father's a Russian prince," Sally said, clearly thrilled to be so well informed. "He got a palace in Moscow and a place in the south of France. Phoebe says he's richer than the queen." "She seems cool, though," Edie said, hoping Sally might expand. "She's a bit—" Sally paused. "She's a bit strange, actually. She's more than a bit strange. She's seriously weird. You probably didn't see it just now in the dormitory, but you will soon." "What sort of seriously weird?" Edie wondered. "Well, she doesn't say much, and you think she's just very dreamy. Then suddenly something will upset her, and she'll get in a real strop. And she tears through books, like someone seriously clever, yet her spelling's atrocious. She tears through books, like someone seriously clever, yet her spelling's atrocious. But weirdest of all, in the way she gets upset about losing stuff. She's always accusing other people of taking her things, even though whatever she's lost always turns up somewhere she's obviously hidden it herself." "Like what?" "Before half term, she accused me of stealing her diary, but then it turned up under her pillow. I pretended not to mind, but Alice could see that I did mind, and she said she understood why and that she would have minded too if Anastasia had accused her. She's basically a real drama queen. Anyone can see that." When they got back to the dormitory, Edie saw to her alarm that her tuck box was gone. "Don't worry, Matron will have taken it to the lower school common room. That's where all the tuck boxes are kept," Sally said. "Come on, I'll show you." Edie followed her down the corridor to a long, brightly lit room with dozens of identical black tuck boxes, arranged in a neat row along the wall, each with its owner's initials marked on top. Edie sensed this was not the time to rescue her phone from its hiding place. The common room was full of girls, some shouting raucously, others talking in secret huddles. "Belinda, Rose, Becky," Sally trilled as girls came over to be introduced, but Edie was too overwhelmed to take in all the new names and faces. She was starting to feel very tired, and it seemed forever until a bell rang, signaling that it was time for bed. As they returned to the dormitory, a woman came down the corridor toward them. Something in her appearance made Edie want to stare. She was tall, with a sculpted bob of jet black hair, and a body as thin and bendy as a blade of grass. Edie noticed the odd glances she attracted from the other girls as they hurried to bed. "That's Miss Winifred, head of the lower school," Sally whispered. "She's pretty, isn't she? She only arrived this term, like us. Apparently she used to live in Monaco." "Will we have any lessons with her?" "You bet. She's our class head teacher and she takes us for math. She can be quite strict. Before half term, she gave me a demerit for being late with my homework. But she's so much cooler than any of the other teachers. You'll see for yourself tomorrow. As Edie changed into her pajamas, she watched the other girls from the corner of her eye. Alice was hanging her uniform in the wardrobe, while Phoebe was sitting on her bed, angrily brushing the tangles from her hair. You shouldn't brush so hard or you'll have no hair left, Sally said teasingly. Phoebe scowled. Anastasia, meanwhile, seemed altogether elsewhere. When the others had all got into bed, she was still standing by her chest of drawers, quietly rearranging her little ornaments and hair clips into a painted wooden box. Edie thought about what Sally had said. She could see exactly why Anastasia might be described as dreamy, but as for wanting to whip up the action, she had seen no sign of that. She was still standing there when Miss Winifred appeared. What are we up to, Anastasia? She asked, smiling. Rearranging the family jewels? The other girls laughed, but Anastasia looked embarrassed. Miss Winifred waited until they were all in bed. Then, good night, girls, she said in her sweet, fluting voice, and left them in the darkness. The dormitory soon fell quiet, but Edie couldn't sleep. The school seemed so big and confusing. If there really was an intrigue going on around Anastasia, she wondered how she would ever get to the bottom of it. And she was worried about her cell phone. She knew it had been foolish to leave it in her tuck box when there was a threat it might be searched. If it was confiscated, she would have failed Cousin Charles's first test. She heard the school clock strike 9 and wondered if she should risk creeping along to the common room to fetch it. Would the feather-like Miss Winifred still be breezing about in the corridor? There was only one way to find out. The dormitory door squealed as Edie opened it. She aimed the beam of her flashlight along the corridor and saw a glint of glass from the common room door at the other end. She tiptoed toward it and crept inside. She shone her flashlight over the tuck boxes and soon found her own. She had hidden the phone in a tattered blue shoebox, along with some photographs and other little treasures. Edie decided to take them all, and as she returned to the dormitory with the box tucked under her arm, she felt a new confidence in her ability to carry out her secret role. But then the corridor lights came on. Edie stood like a startled rabbit as a hawk-like figure loomed toward her. She looked up, expecting to see Miss Winifred, but it was the man. Edith Wilson, what on earth are you doing? She demanded. Edith clutched the shoebox to her stomach. She remembered what Sally had said. She's more bark than bite. But at that moment, the man looked as if she might swallow her whole. Well, I went to get something from my tuck box, Edie stammered. You went to get something from your tuck box? Miss Mannering sounded incredulous, as if Edith had admitted to breaking into the school safe. At 9 o'clock at night? Yes. Miss Mannering let out a loud breath. You have a lot to learn, Edith Wilson, if you wish to stay on the right side of me. Edie thought with longing of her bed, wishing she could dive inside it and hide under the covers. She realized suddenly that she was shining her flashlight onto Miss Mannering's boots and made to hide it in her pocket. Give that to me, please, Edith, Miss Mannering said, stretching out a hand. Edith gave it to her. And that, whatever it is. Edie shook her head, holding the shoebox tight. She felt a rising panic. She didn't care what else happened. She couldn't let the man have it. Give it to me, Edith, at once. No, Edie choked, making no effort to fight her tears. A door banged down the corridor, and Edie turned and saw Miss Fotheringay appear. "Ah, it's you, Miss Mannering," the headmistress said in a calm voice. "I saw a light and wondered what was going on. Is everything all right?" "No," Miss Mannering replied shortly. "I have found this child emerging from the common room. She tells me she went to get something from her tuck box." "Is this right, Edith?" Miss Fotheringay asked, looking at her kindly. "Yes," Edie whispered. "What was it you needed so badly?" Edie could not say. "She has refused to hand it over," Miss Mannering said. "If this weren't her first night at school, I'd—" Miss Fotheringay cleared her throat meaningfully, and Miss Mannering stopped. "Give it to me, Edith," Miss Fotheringay said. Edith looked at her hesitantly, but something in her expression made her relinquish the box without further protest. "Thank you," Miss Fotheringay said quietly. "I can assure you I shall take good care of it." She gently steered Edie back into the dormitory and stood over her while she got into bed. When she had gone, Edie lay on her back, watching the shadows from the window slip across the gray ceiling. As she drifted off to sleep, it was not Babka but Miss Fotheringay whom she saw, gazing down at her with searching eyes. And that is the end of chapter 7. We'll stop there and pick up tomorrow night at 1 a.m. This time I will make sure to set myself an alarm so I do not oversleep. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the reading. I hope that you enjoyed this part of the book. And again, it's called The Girl with the Glass Bird by Esme Kerr, if you want to check this book out yourself. Thank you so much for joining. Until next time.